Thanks a lot. I think the attendance of your predecessor, Leo Varadkar, at the Munich Security Conference was significant. I think it was part of a drive that has been ongoing under Leo Varadkar and under Micheál Martin to erode whatever is left of neutrality and to display to the world that we're serious about this stuff. Don't worry, we're going to grow out of the immature neutrality. My basic question is whether you intend to continue in the same vein. Leo Varadkar and Micheál Martin crossed a number of lines that were not previously crossed, but the one that Leo Varadkar very much had and Micheál Martin in their sight is the question of the triple lock. The triple lock is the only thing that meant that legally a government that clearly supported the US in its invasion of Iraq, facilitated the invasion of Iraq in terms of the use of Shannon Airport, it could not send ordinary Irish soldiers to go and fight and die in a war for oil and profit in the Middle East for the US. There was a recent opinion poll which, very interestingly, people's attitudes to an EU army. And the higher income group you're from, the more in favour of an EU army you are. The lower income group you are, the less in favour of an EU army. Why? Quite obviously, because it's those in lower income groups who will disproportionately be involved in going to fight in these wars. So are you still intending to proceed with this attempt to dismantle the triple lock, which protects some part of what is left of our neutrality?
To conclude now.
Thanks very much. A lot of issues there, Ken Court, and a lot of very important issues. So let me try and take them. Firstly, on the day I assumed this office, I spoke to the President of Ukraine, to President Zelensky, to outline to him Ireland's ongoing support for the people of Ukraine, for their territorial integrity, and for the European values of freedom. I would have had further discussions with European colleagues in Warsaw and in Brussels in relation to the importance of Europe continuing to stand full stead behind Ukraine. You asked me specifically in relation to firstly Iran, Israel, and I think it's quite right and proper that both myself and the Taoiseach on behalf of the government have condemned the large-scale attacks by Iran on Israel. These reckless attacks were a significant escalation of the situation. They were a flagrant threat to international peace and security. We continue to call on all parties to show maximum restraint because the stability of the region is at grave risk. Any further escalation will have catastrophic consequences for millions of civilians. So I think restraint and de-escalation is where both Ireland and the European Union should be using our voice and our influence. In relation to recognition of the State of Palestine, it's absolutely my intention and the Taoiseach's and that of the government that Ireland will recognise the State of Palestine. I had two opportunities to meet with the Spanish Prime Minister last week, including welcoming him to government buildings last Friday, where we had a detailed discussion in relation to this. It is the position of government that we wish to recognise the State of Palestine. Both myself and Prime Minister Sanchez agreed last Friday that we would continue to coordinate on our efforts to recognise a Palestinian state alongside a number of like-minded countries. I think it is important that recognition should be done in a way that can have the most positive impact on the situation on the ground. In terms of a specific time frame, I don't wish to put that on the record of the House now, other than to say this, that my own assessment is that time is coming much, much closer. A number of countries recognising a Palestinian state at the same time, I do believe, would give weight to that decision. And tomorrow I'll travel to Brussels for the European Council on Wednesday and Thursday, and we'll continue to have an opportunity to engage with heads of government of like-minded countries. We don't have a kind of published list, as Deputy Merkel asks, but indeed he's mentioned a number of countries that have indicated publicly, I think, a similar open-mindedness to perhaps recognising the state of Palestine, because we're very clear. The reason we do this is we're very clear as a country, and always have been, that the only way to achieve lasting peace and stability in the region is through the implementation of a two-state solution, with Israel and Palestinian states living side by side in peace and security, with an Israel with the right to security and peace and safety, and with Palestine with the right to safety and to peace as well. In relation to the specific question regarding the association agreement, my predecessor, Leo Varadkar, did sign a letter with, again, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez to the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, asking that the European Union would review the association agreement with Israel, specifically from a human rights point of view and a compliance with international human rights law. I think that's an appropriate thing to do. This is a country that values international human rights law. I did take my opportunity when I met President von der Leyen last Thursday, to raise this issue with her directly. I outlined to her the rationale behind the letter, and the ask was that I think all of us want to see a ceasefire, and I think therefore we should always consider all of the levers at our disposal to help bring about the pressure to create a ceasefire. And other countries or collections of countries have done similar. I believe the UK and the US have both given consideration to that similar review. The President, I think, will reflect on my comments, but she did also point out that it is open to foreign affairs ministers at the Foreign Affairs Council to consider these matters, and I believe they're due to have an engagement with the Israeli foreign minister shortly. So I'll continue to keep in close contact with the Taoiseach in relation to this in the time available to me. Just to be very clear, I mean, Ireland remains, and the Irish government remains, fully committed to our policy of neutrality. And I think it is entirely possible and plausible and credible and in fact necessary as a neutral member state to not excuse ourselves from discussions around defence and security. I think that's quite important. We have an obligation. The first obligation of a government is to the security of its state and its people and their safety. And I think that's something we shouldn't shirk from. That's not the same as being militarily aligned. There's no question of Ireland's eroding or leaving its position of military neutrality. That's not the position of government. I don't believe it's the position of this House, and I don't believe it's the position of the majority of people in this country. But I do think it's important that as a country we don't shy away from, within that confines, having a discussion about defence and security. And I commend the Taoiseach for his leadership in relation to this. I do think the triple lock, I do support the direction of travel outlined by the Taoiseach, because I don't think it's appropriate that a country like Russia can effectively have a veto on where we send peacekeeping troops. And at the moment, it's either trust the Irish Parliament, the Irish Oireachtas, or allow Putin decide where we can send our peacekeeping troops. We have a difference of view on this, but that's clearly my view, and the one that government will bring forward through legislation. But it is important that it's important that we do tease all of these matters through in this House, and that's certainly our intention. Gurmagat.